So let's fast forward a little bit to in 2002. You're back in Wales.
Yes, yeah.
And that's where we began our stories.
That's right.
So what happened in 2002?
We had organized another small group to go over and work on this friend's farm. This time it was a group from our church, a Spanish-speaking congregation in New Orleans. And so 6 of us went over, and I think the second day we were there, my friend Alex had hired a little mini backhoe. Because I'd had some experience operating machinery, I was operating that and just doing some grading and a little ditch work. And everybody else was doing tasks with other folks. I was basically on my own in this little box, being thrown back and forth, and the roaring of the engine behind me. And so by the end of the day, we knocked off around 4, and everybody would go into the kitchen for coffee. And so I turned off the machine, and I didn't want to go and, go in where it was hot and kind of congested with all these friends, although I love hanging with my friends. So I went out past the house, past the garage, out past the cowshed, just looking for a place to be alone and spend some time with the Lord. And I found I found that as I went out past the cowshed, there was a pile of old rubble, and so all overgrown with weeds. And I walked around the far side of it, thinking to myself at the time, well, I'd like to find something soft to sit on that doesn't, buck me around like a horse all day. And to my surprise, I found a piece of concrete slab jutting out of the pile and had a big a cushion of moss on it. So I sat down, and it was as if God had known the desire of my heart. And I just suddenly began to weep, overwhelmed by God's amazing love. And I wept, and just the joy of being with friends that I've known and loved for, this would have been, 20 years, more than 20 years at the time. And to be in the countryside, smelling the country smells. I grew up in dairy country in Maryland. And so this was dairy country in Wales. So the sights and the smells were all very well known. And I was just overcome by this amazing love that God pours into us. And so I wept, and then I opened my eyes and I looked out over the fields and a farm and a little village off in the distance, and I just realized, my goodness, Lord, you give me such an amazing portion of your love, and yet I know that all of these people, they haven't a clue. And I just began to weep again, and I said, Lord, if there were anything that I could do. And immediately the Lord spoke to me, and he said, remember the chapel that I showed you in that vision? I said, yes, Lord. He said, I want you to go back there and pray every day. And the revival that I showed you is going to begin there, and it's going to pop out in several places, and it's going to go all over this land. And it's going to spread into the nations just like I showed you. And as he said that, I just, again, I was already unglued. I became more unglued and wept and rejoiced. And then I began to reason. And I said, well, come on, Lord, get real. I live in New Orleans, and I've got a responsible ministry job, and But for everything that I came up with, God just said, if you say yes and do what I'm asking you to do, I will cover all those issues. And as the list continued to grow, the Lord's clarity also did.
Many people, God has brought people to New England, and many of them have had the same story you've had, where they've been brought from other places.
Yes.
And with this understanding that if you listen to the Lord and do what he tells you,
yeah, absolutely,
he'll open the way.
Yes.
And that's why I think your story is so important for us to hear. So that was 2002.
Yes, spring of 2002.
Spring of 2002.
Yeah.
When was the next time you went to Wales?
I went back by myself in October of 2002. I worked, for many years with the same group of people that we all got saved through a ministry called Gospel Outreach. And then we went to Latin America to do reconstruction after this Guatemala earthquake in 1976. And so that became a group of churches. We were almost 100 churches strong in our heyday. Hard to think that far back, but so I spoke to the other the other Americans that had gone down with me together, and I told them what I felt God was asking me to do, and they thought I was out to lunch. They said, "Hey, you speak Spanish, not Welsh. I mean, are you thinking of opening a Spanish congregation? And if so, wouldn't you be better off in London rather than out in the dairy farm country of West Wales?" Didn't make any sense to them.
Yeah.
Didn't really make any sense to me as far as our brain goes.
Yeah.
But I asked them subsequently if they would authorize me the funds. That was another amazing incident. On my list of questions is where the fund's going to come from, and I got back to my office, and among all of the correspondence where all of our missions donors' mail came into was a letter from a law firm that had been working on my aunt's will. She had passed away and had told me that she was leaving money for my ministry. And so there was a letter from the law firm saying, "This is just about to be settled after 3 or 4 years, and we'll be sending a check." And the Lord said that's where the funds are going to come from. So I asked the brethren if they would authorize me to go over by myself and stay a few weeks. Yeah. And I did. And, it's just absolutely amazing that from that day that the Lord asked me, Chris, to come and pray, that not a single day went by without him in one way or another confirming in an amazing way that this was really what he was talking about. So they authorized me the finance to go over and spend a few weeks by myself, and so I did.
Now, when did you have the extraordinary experience at the chapel that you write about in your you write about a rainbow? When was that?
Oh, that was in the spring of 2002. So after that experience where the Lord spoke to me, I'd forgotten about that. I went to bed that night, and I said to the Lord, "Well, if you want me to go out there in the morning, wake me up." Mm-hmm. So 5 o'clock the next morning, I was wide awake, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. So I got in the car this time, and I drove up to the chapel. I knew exactly where it was. And just as I got up to that little crook in the road, there was a little paving machine parked off to the side. And I thought, oh great, they're going to fix these old bumpy Welsh lanes. And as I drove over the cattle grid, it was a brand new asphalt surface, not a tire track on it. And I saw that, and as soon as I realized that was going on, the Lord spoke to me and he says, "You see, I'm getting this place ready for traffic to start coming in here."